executive orders are like. And, a couple days ago, the conversation was, well, it has to go through the Senate, and there's 60 people, and, the conversation has changed to we actually are here. And, this policy and our mission, we focus on solutions, right? And, we know the problems. And in the industry of education, we have had numerous times to be traumatized as a people. And our children struggle as a result of it. And privatization and decisions are made for our children based on how they perform in schools. And now that the new administration has pushed their agenda to dismantle one of the most important departments of the federal government, we are faced with needing a real solution, action steps, guidance, a vision, so that we can come together collectively and have a strategy to make an impact. And I stand here, my name is Kia Jackson, and I shifted, I'm not here to talk about myself, but after 20 years in education, and some of my fellow doctors of education are here, and I love the support. I transitioned into educating in the world of advocacy and things that I'm passionate about. So this is the first year doing a panel focused solely on education. And I went to Kevin, and I'm like, Kevin, we got to do an education panel. And he was like, you got it, doll. Whatever you want to do, go ahead and do it. And so I reached out, I did some, went online, and Kevin always knows heavy hitters. So he was like, well, first it was Dr. Janelle, and I don't think she could make it today. So then he was like, let's bring in Dr. Saritha, and he brought Mr. Cunningham that came all the way from North Carolina to be here. And we have Mandela from Education Trust, and we have Alicia from the National Black Child Development Institute. It's always a mouthful. And so we had a call, and we talked about a few things, and we had these really great ideas, and we had some follow-up conversation with some more suggested ideas, and then the actual worst of the worst, and the rug was pulled. So I'm going to allow each panelist to take a minute apiece, which I was going to do the introductions and go through all that, but you need to tell about yourself a little bit. And then we'll delve into the real next issue is, as we talked about education of policy, right? We want to teach people about how advocacy and policy works, right? So now that this has happened, this bill has two next steps, right? It's appropriations and budget reconciliation. And so we'll delve into that as we move forward, but let me start with Dr. Saritha to kick it off.
Okay. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm Saritha Smith Collins, and I am proud to say that I am a career educator, and I consider myself a teacher on assignment today. What I would like to do is to use my background in education from teacher all the way to the top level of the superintendency to help with the education of all children, but specifically African American Black children. That's been my career focus, my career passion, understanding the disparities that our kids experience and understanding why those things happen, and trying to help with policy and practice in terms of what are the best ways to approach a better process of education. So after working in many districts across the country, I've worked in at least 5 at the leadership level and the teaching level, from the West Coast, Seattle, to Northeast, where I was in DC public schools, Baltimore City public schools, Richmond City, Virginia schools. And I saw common themes across the board in all of those districts, from the highest to the lowest performing. So with that kind of information, I have transitioned into the world of business, where I've worked with some of the most impressive businesses in the field of education that are also trying to address issues, but we're always not making an alignment. So that's been my job for the last 19 years or so, working with Apple Computer, Promethean, places that produce services and products for students and teachers. So I bring today my experience and understanding of what the needs are in terms of our kids, and those needs are holistic. So I'm now working on a book. I've written several, but one I'm working on now will be what I'll focus on in this conversation. Why are we having problems with our relationships? That's going to be my focus that I hope that I'll have a chance to talk
Absolutely.
about. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Alicia, we always do ladies first.
Yes. Hello, everyone. I'm so glad to be here today. My name is Alicia Hardy. I'm the Vice President of Policy and Research at the National Black Child Development Institute. We are a think and do tank. We see ourselves as a preeminent voice for Black children and families across the country, and we focus particularly on Black children from ages 0, from birth to 8. And we do this through our 8 essential outcomes for Black child development, which are purposely created in an asset-based frame, what we know and believe that every Black child needs and deserves in order to be healthy, well, and thriving. And so it begins at birth with every Black child deserves to be born at a healthy weight. They need to be able to breathe clean air and drink clean water, have access to healthy foods and vegetables, live and play in safe communities, have access to attend affirming and expanding schools, have books and toys that reflect who they are and who they can be. They're seen and treated as children. They have access to a safe and appropriate internet and digital spaces and are not harmed by AI and technology. And they also are able to just be, not have to have this pressure of becoming, but also just being and existing as Black children. And so we do this through the work of our Village Network. We have 26 locations across 18 states in the District of Columbia, and we do dynamic work with what we call our villages, which are chapters and affiliates across the country. And we do this work at the intersection of programs and direct services, as well as policy advocacy and movement building. Our movement building is from the ground up. We believe that movements must come from people who have the proximity and knowledge of what solutions need to happen. And we also do it horizontally, recognizing that there is power in building coalitions across movements. I'm also the mother of 2 beautiful Black children whom I love and adore. And I have to just throw this in there. I am a graduate from the national treasure, Morgan State University.
Yeah. Same. I'm a bear. Yes. Yes, I'm a bear.
Yes, the National Black Child Development Institute.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And if you have your program, we are the first panel of day 2, and you'll see the titles. And also in the back of the program, all of our panelists have a picture and a bio. So you can keep up with them, and we will have a directory post this event where you can go onto the website and engage with everybody that you have seen over the 2 days. All right, so now we will start with, we can start on the end and come in. So Dr. Cunningham, yep.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Eric Cunningham. I'm the proud superintendent for Halifax County Schools. And when I look out here, I see that everyone in here loves cotton. And if you love sweet potatoes, then you love rural America. It's time for us to have a serious discussion about rural America. I've had an opportunity to work in urban, suburban, and now I'm the CEO of a rural school district, and I've learned a lot that I'm looking forward to share. A little bit about me, 36 years in education. Now I'm a little different. I graduated from a school called Liberty University, where I played basketball, located in Lynchburg, Virginia, and I completed my doctoral studies at the University of Virginia. So I have a balanced approach to what I'm going to bring to you today. I am so proud to be sharing the stage with this illustrious panel, and I look forward to sharing with you my thoughts.
Awesome, thank you very much. And we're excited to have you. And then we have Mandela Dinkins from
Yes.
Education Trust. He's the Director of Advocacy and Engagement, and we're excited to have you.
Yeah, well, that's tough to follow. Everyone, I'm Mandela Deskins. I'm the Director of Advocacy and Engagement at the Education Trust, which is an advocacy organization that advocates for educational equity, particularly for underserved communities. So, of course, that means Black and brown kids, that means low-income folks, that means folks with disabilities, LGBTQIA students. And, you know, just a little bit about our organization. So we do both advocacy at the state and federal level, and we also do policy, because you have to have, you know, the understanding of what the facts are and the data, especially in this current climate, to be able to advocate. So a little bit more about myself. I've done state, local, federal organizing, advocacy, lobbying for my entire career. And I hope today to talk a little bit about the things that are going on, how we should be understanding and taking them in, because we understand that they're confusing and there's all kind of different messages coming from all different ways, trying to control what we think about, especially as Black folk, because, you know, it's easier to lead people off a cliff if you put wool over their eyes. So with that, I will
Awesome.
pass it back.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. So we're going to just jump right in. As I had initially said that we were going to, I wanted to lead with the dismantling has dismantled. You've had over 1,300 people who were laid off, and then that was like on the 13th, and then by the 19th, then it's closed. You know, or that's where we are with that. So, yes, I'm disheartened, but I think this panel is going to give us some hope and some action steps that, you know, we have a room full of leaders, right? We look for a targeted audience, not just, we welcome everybody, but this Minority Policy Summit is where we bring together the brains and the community leaders and different organizational leaders so that you can go back to your people and extend the information. So I'm going to start with, we have some roadblocks, right? And so I'm going to ask Dr. Sarita let's just break down some of these roadblocks that have gotten us, they've been building up to this point, right? Like why, you know, DEI, closing of DOE, and where is Kevin says, you know, DEI, no, it's discrimination. This is really what it boils down to. So, Dr. Sarita, yeah.
Thank you. We have to, first of all, think about why we're in this predicament today. And Dr. Still gave us a lot of reasons why, the underlying issues, the root causes. And very often when we think about education, we go to trying to fix something, trying to solve something. But we try to go about that without really thinking about the problem and the complexities of trying to educate people. We're trying to educate humans. So why are roadblocks in the way of educating humans, especially certain humans? So we've got to understand, first of all, and ask ourselves, why is there an attack on education? We know that there's an attack across the board, but why education? Shouldn't we educate people, all of us? Well, some people believe no. We know that education provides knowledge. So we have to understand that somebody is trying to block knowledge for everyone to benefit. And we know that education is the lever for social change. So we have some people who do not agree that we need social change to benefit all of us. So if we look at those two issues, we can begin to understand why we have some of these current things going on, such as closing down the Department of Education that is supposed to facilitate the education of everyone. In America, we have a lofty goal: give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free. And we propose that we're going to educate all of us. But we have to understand that that proposition was never including Black people. It did not start that way. The process in America was not designed to educate Black people and other people who have differences. And therein lies the problem, differences. Some people are accepting of differences and others are not. So we have this pull and tug that's going on, and we have been going on with that for generations. All of us sit here as accomplished adults because the pull and tug has been in place. So as we think about what it is we need to do, Dr. Steele said it, we're going to have courageous leadership to do what has been done over time, and I hope I'll have a chance to give you some specifics of that as we talk further.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much. And we're going to build upon that. One of the things, we're going to build upon that because the roadblocks, I want to go, tie in and go back and tie it in, for the audience to really understand all of the parts that the federal government brought into the states for the education, which states hold 90% of that really. But that 10% that the federal government supported the states with impacted from early childhood to college, to higher education. So Amanda, would you provide some insight for the different parts of the Department of Ed that will now impact the states?
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate you, bringing up that the Department of Ed was really a small but important part of the education ecosystem. We know that you have your local school districts, you have your state, that all are providing funding and policy. When we think about the Department of Ed, we should be clear on what the Department of Ed really does,
right,
and why it's so important to dismantle the Department of Education, given that it only gives up to 10% of funding to school districts. So there's a couple of key points. Number one, the Office of Civil Rights. Now, I didn't say this in my introduction, but before I came to the Education Trust, I worked at the NAACP, National Director of Advocacy. So I used to go around the country and work with communities on a variety of civil rights issues. And one that continuously comes up is issues in the school district. Well, you can go to your superintendent, or you can go to your school board, or you can go to your county commissioner. But what happens if your school board member was present at January 6th? And he was there because you saw the pictures, but he's not going to lose his election. And the people are afraid to speak up because they know this is Klan territory. Well, what happens when your state is taking over your school district? So now your school district, who are you going to fight to? You're going to go to your governor? The governor was a part of the plot to destroy your school system. So then you have the Office of Civil Rights, which is where you would try to file a complaint federally and say, this is a violation of my civil rights. Any of us who have kept track of police brutality cases know that eventually you try to go to the DOJ. So here we are trying to go to the Office of Civil Rights to deal with civil rights complaints, violations of civil rights, which we know that Black and brown folks, LGBTQ folks, and folks with disabilities are going to suffer, and they are the ones who are going to this Office of Civil Rights. So that's the first part that the Department of Education does. The second thing is it gives out grants to school districts, mainly around helping low-income students and helping students with disabilities. Well, when we think about where that money is going to go, who's going to be affected by these grants suddenly not being available or not being available in the way that they were before? Probably low-income black folk and and black folk with disability or black and brown folk with disability, because a lot of black youth and brown youth are qualified as having different disabilities, right? They might have an individual education plan. The third part is the research. Well, if we rely on states to do research, we know certain states are not going to do research they don't want to do. We were there when the census was done, and we remember from the census that folks didn't want to count certain people of the parts of their community so that they would be able to deny them services. So now we have a federal system that provides the research and data so that we understand the education trends, where help is needed, so we can know where to send funds. And then the last piece is the federal financial aid system, financial aid. So that's to help people who need help in the colleges and universities. So when we look at what the dismantling of the Department of Education is, it is an attempt to take these controls, these supports that were meant to help more of us be successful and be able to reach our full potential, and take them away from the federal government and send them back to states. And if any of us know states, we know that there are some states who are all right. Now, none of them are educating black children to the ability that they should be. We're not seeing the results we want, but we understand that some states would have us go back, way back, if they had the opportunity. And we know states' rights, because we remember that. We've heard states' rights before. That's not foreign to my parents, to folks on this panel, to folks in this room. So I just wanted to just kind of set the stage of what this actually is.
And thank you. You did an awesome job of that,
Thank
too.
you.
Thank you for your expertise. So that kind of transitions again. I was going to ask Alicia, in terms of early childhood, right? Just give a very, bullet about the problems, but what do you think, and as your organization, how do we get on top of this early childhood piece? What was your plan for it, and knowing that it was happening, could happen? I'm gonna let you freestyle on that a little bit.
Yeah, so when we're looking at early education, part of it is definitely within the Department of Education, because early education is all the way through kindergarten, first grade, but majority of early education programs are housed within the Department of Health and Human Services, where we see the Administration for Children and Families and programs like the Child Care Development Block Grant, Head Start, and so those are things that are at risk. And unlike K through 12 funding, for early education, particularly for childcare, the federal government supports states significantly. Most of the money that states have in terms of supporting early education, particularly in childcare, and we're looking at Head Start, comes from the federal government. And so when we are dismantling these pieces and we're doing away with these agencies, it's not simply just taking away the people that work there, it's also going to be an attack on the funding. And when we look at early education, oftentimes there's this economic case for early education. And it's important because it does boost workforce participation and productivity. It supports local economies and boosts workforce by creating early education jobs. It also creates economic stability and mobility, particularly for women, when they have access to child care and early education. But when we look at just the economic case, we often tie early education access to work as a work support. And it's important to see early education, particularly child care, as something more than a work support, because every child, regardless of their parents' work status or being able to continue their education and needing child care, every child should have access to high quality early education with educators that are well paid, that are well resourced, where they have benefits that they need, and they also have career ladders. And I really want to make an emphasis on this point of high quality education. Oftentimes when we're defining quality and thinking about what quality means, it is devoid of what that means specifically for Black communities. And there are some universal aspects to what quality means, but there's some specific nuance of what that means for Black children specifically. Going going back to the 8 essential outcomes I talked about, 3 of those from the National Black Child Development Institute are particularly important to what we think of as quality. A black child cannot be in a school that is quality if they are not seen and treated as a child, if they are adultified, if they're punished and pushed out of schools, if they are seen as being rowdy when they're really just curious, when they're trying to express themselves and learn how to regulate themselves, but they're seen as poorly behaved, that's not a quality education. When they don't have books and toys that reflect who they are and can be, that 0 to 8 period is a critical period of identity development, understanding who you are, your position in the world, what people think about you, and how you think about yourself. And when you don't, in that 0 to 8 period, books and toys are the primary learning implements for children. So when you don't have them, then you're starting to send this message to our young children that you're not that important. Your stories do not matter. Your experiences are othered. And then finally, the other piece, the third one that is critically important, is that every child attend schools that affirm and expand them, where they're in education that allows them to appreciate the fullness of their identity, that affirms who they are, where the curriculum and materials are culturally responsive, linguistically appropriate, that they are what black children need to learn about. And not just black children, all children need to learn about this too. This is not just a benefit to black children, but all children learning about the history, the beauty, the fullness of black people is extremely important to expanding all children. And so this is a tie into, when we look at the federal government, some of the protections that Mandela talked about, some of the data that's being removed is going to be Office of Civil Rights data, is data on discipline, on punishment, what that looks like in early education particularly. Dr. Walter Gilliam did and really pushed for research that looked at what this means, particularly in pre-K and kindergarten, where we see higher rates of suspension and expulsion than we do in K through 12 settings. Children are being pushed out much more in pre-K and kindergarten than they are in later years. And so this is something that's so critical and important as we lose these federal offices, as we lose these pieces. This is something that risks particularly impacting our black children.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The impact, that, like I said from the beginning, we've already been hit. So the detriment of where we are right now, and there's even bringing it back to the states, as Mandela was saying, and we all know geographically, all the states are different. They have different economies, different things that funnel them. They're different just based on geography. You know, you have your agricultural states. You know, you have your states that might just focus on cattle and producing meat and stuff. You know, you got states that are focused on sports. You have states that, you know, grow different things. They might just only grow hemp. You know, they're all different. And so you have states that have a lot of racial discriminatory practices across the board. One of the reasons why Brown versus Board of Education 2 came out, because they had, like, we put one out, you're not doing nothing, we need you to get this ball rolling. So, you know, that's a problem. And so it kind of leads me to the next question around, now that the states have taken this back, Dr. Saritha, how do we compare to other countries? Well, what are we going to do? How are we going to be measured? And not that I'm a fan of No Child Left Behind, which came out of the federal government, because it caused schools to turn to focusing solely on the testing scores because they got money from the federal government. If, you know, teachers stopped teaching, they were teaching, and it's true. Because the school gets money if the test scores are good. So that was a big thing. You could lose your job if your test scores weren't right. You know what I'm saying? They're calling you down to the office to have a talk. That you're like, I'm doing the best I can. Well, you're not bringing the test scores up. So that was how they created that so that they can compare around the world. With this going back to the states, how do we measure our success globally?
That's such a great question, because very often we'll hear that our country is about 40th on the measures of accountability for quality education. And very often we hear people say that we don't need a Department of Education because we're doing so poorly. But one of the things that I think we have to talk about is we're not measuring apples to apples. We're measuring apples to something else, not maybe even oranges. Because when we look at countries, first of all, let me back up and say that I've worked for all of my career as a member of the National Alliance of Black School Educators. And NABC is the acronym for that organization. And it's the place where a lot of the K-12 black educators and others, the university professors, the parents, all of the stakeholders who are concerned about the education of African American and black children, we've come together to figure out what is it that we need to collectively do across the country and nationally to improve and increase the outcomes for our children. And over time, we've learned that there are countries that do better. Why? So I know that several years ago, my husband and I actually went on one of the black educator superintendent level excursions to South Africa to look at what were the comparisons there with America. And what we saw was almost a mirror of the experiences with the apartheid in South Africa and the civil rights issues that we had in America. And we saw some of the same things and some of the same outcomes. But for the people who were not aware of our history and were not aware of why we're in the predicament we're in, we saw the actual apartheid in the setup of the schools. We went to visit all levels of schools in South Africa as African American leaders, and we saw the white schools. Everybody in those schools were white. They had the best of everything. The kids were achieving at high levels. We were then taken to the brown schools. Black people who were, and this is where colorism and the caste system comes into place. Everybody in that school, nobody was darker than I was. And it was almost frightening to look out there to see such segregated schools in practice still today. And then we went to Shantytown, and that's where the darker brothers and sisters were educated. They weren't even in a building. They were in places with a cover outside. So first of all, before we make comparisons, we got to think about the inequities and the disparities that are systemic. So when we talk about people who say there isn't systemic racism, it doesn't exist, there are examples. So as we come back to America, we have prime examples to draw a picture of what people are trying to deny. Then we have people who last year, black educators who went to Sweden and Norway. That's the highest achieving school systems in the country, in the world, actually. So what were the differences? First of all, the homogeneity. Everybody in that setting was basically white. So they don't have the diversity that we have in America. They don't have the issues that we have. Everyone receives everything that they need from the home to the school, starting with early education. That's all provided. Educators are regarded at a high level, and parents don't have engagement in that process. It's the educators who are operating the schools and running those schools. The parent obligation is to help at lunchtime when those kids bicycle home, so health is there, childcare, all of those things that we know are the inequities and disparities are a part of the support systems. We don't have that in our country. As we know, we can't agree on anything in this country to provide a quality educational experiences. And I go back to what Annette LaRue said in her book, Unequal Childhood, Class, Race, and Family. We have unequal childhoods, unequal homes, unequal schools, and unequal families. So until we even those particular instances, we're going to have disparities across the world, especially our country.
Thank you very much. And that's, again, highlighting one of the disparity is one of the platform problems in the education industry. You know, you made all of the things that you spoke of about Sweden, like, it's the entire culture. And I always say, you know, in public education, it's just like a public water fountain, right? And all are welcome, and there should be no discrimination. Another important act that came out of the federal government was about inclusion, the IDEA Act. And it took students, because there's a spectrum of learning, right? And people always kind of have a thing that they think special education is geared towards, in their mind, you know, a certain type of child, right? But they exclude the talented and gifted. TAG is a part of the special education spectrum, which is why differentiated instruction even exists, because we have to learn how to teach in one classroom setting, everybody. And some schools don't even have a co-special education teacher. You might very well have 28 students in your room and no support, and it's just you. And you have to have differentiated instruction skills to be able to manage that on a daily basis, capture that data, know how, if you need to reteach it, who learned what, how they learned it, if they didn't get it when you evaluate it at the end of the 90-minute time that you have with these young people, and then have to go home and figure out what you need to do different the next day if you have to reteach, right? And you're doing your job as doing the work, but there's some schools, based on the standards, they have a scope and sequence that's a part of the curriculum. And you have to be on this day teaching this, which doesn't, if I have to go back and reteach something my kids didn't get, how am I held accountable? You want me to just leave it? You want me to leave it and just keep going because you want me to follow the scope and sequence? And so we're talking about left behind, because if you didn't get it, my boss wants me to move forward. Yes, Kevin, thank you.
So we're talking about a lot of problems exist now. We're talking about already exist even before we got rid of the Department of Education. So what's the future? I mean, how do we plan, or do anyone know how to address this problem going forward? Like, what are we going to do differently? What should we be asking lawmakers to do?
So that was a great question, and I actually was going to ask Dr. Cunningham and Mandela, you know, I want them to delve into that solution piece, so, because I know they do a lot of work at the federal level, and as a lead of a whole, you know, school district, he knows the impact that that's going to have. So Dr. Cunningham, would you begin to tell us what we need to do now for collective action? And as I started talking about, the bill now has to go through appropriations, and it has to go through reconciliation, and what we can do.
In June, right before COVID, schools were shuttered. In June, I'm riding around with my principal of the year. We have these impromptu parades where, you know, because I have a team of SROs, we can stop traffic in these small towns. And so I have my principal of the year, and we're riding through the town, waving at the kids, telling them, keep going, you know, and don't break that Chromebook that we put in everyone's hand. 8 days later, he texted me. He said, Dr. Cunningham, I'm in the hospital. They get ready to put a tube in me. 8 days later, he was dead. COVID. He was the first administrator in the state of North Carolina to succumb from that virus. And I was left shocked. I dropped to my knees. That's all I could do. But what happened immediately was I put them buses on the road. We started feeding because schools were closed, and I'm in a rural area with food insecurity. We put those buses on the road and we started working. There are 3 things that we must do that I learned from COVID. Urgency. People, our black kids are struggling. in urban, suburban, and rural areas. Am I right or wrong? We've been talking about this since 1984 when we developed that term at risk. All that money kept flowing to us, and I'm asking every one of you now, has it worked? There needs to be a sense of urgency about our schools and our students. And we also need innovation, just like we did when COVID hit. We became innovative. Think about all the strategies and stuff that you were putting out there. And then we have to own it. Our kids are failing partly because of us, because of the people teaching them and leading them. And we have to own it. And we need to get back into that think tank and start creating and reimagining again. Because all kids matter, no matter where they teach, where they're going to school, where they reside. All kids matter, and we need a collective voice to talk about it. And I'd like to close with this. The greatest DEI experiment that America has ever completed, is the public schools. Think about it. Diversity, equity, inclusion is all in the public schools. We must do whatever we can to build that institution up and make it as strong as it was in the 60s. Student achievement was better in the 60s than it is today, and they didn't have as many resources that I have today. We need to go back and collectively ask why, what was being done, and what do we need to be doing differently today, and we can do that.
Absolutely. And I think what happened, what you were saying, what did we do, what was different? I'm even thinking like before integration, when we were responsible for just our own selves and the teacher could even come stay at your house. That was the level of respect. But moving forward, Mandla, I want to ask you, because of the work that you do, what should we do, how should we be moving forward to secure funding and having a policy solution for really some active next steps for what people should be doing?
Yes, absolutely. So I think to get what Mr. Cunningham was talking about, at the local level we have that work. At the state and the federal level, we also have to support that work that comes down to the students. And one of the things that we have seen often, and I'm gonna get to it, I'm
Take your
moving
time,
quick.
go ahead.
One of the things that we have seen from this administration is there are, big to-dos to introduce a new executive order or some new thing that he's gonna do. Maybe it's a Dear Colleague letter, or maybe it's a different executive order saying some messaging talking point. But then when it has to actually get done, they either try to do it illegally or it needs to go back to Congress. So we can't necessarily do anything about the illegal part outside of raising the awareness that this is illegal and making sure our folks understand what's going on so they can push whatever powers that they have access to. And when I talk about the illegal part, is dismantling the federal agency by just firing 2,000 workers and figuring, when we act, everything's fine. It's still gonna work exactly how, it worked yesterday, just with half of the people, right? With over 400 people out of the Office of Civil Rights, by the way. But there's the illegal part, that's one piece. But the second piece is to actually dismantle the Department of Education requires an act of Congress. So we still have an opportunity to weigh in there. And as we know, some of our members of Congress don't want to do town halls anymore. They don't want to meet in person with constituents anymore. Now, the advocate in me says, on one level we say, well, that's horrible. Wow, they're not doing their duty. But when the advocate in me says, when somebody is scared to meet you, then that means you just have to find them. So the first thing we need to do is continue to very clearly voice that this dismantling of the Department of Education is unacceptable, because that up to 10% of funding, those civil rights protecting, that research, we need that. And we're not gonna let you just get rid of it and no one has said anything, and there is no responsibility to you as a public official that we put in office to at least put up a fight, right? So that's our first step. I think the second step is in our own communities. I don't know where folks are from. I assume you're not all from the District of Columbia, but in your own school districts and your own states, you should be looking at ways to shore up and support the students, period. And then that will then lead to how can we make sure that some of these protections that we're now seeing be, dismantled. How can we make sure that we find ways to protect those protections and that money and that funding for our students? What we will see is, as we see with all of these, administration illegal activities, is we generally find out what the effect is from our own communities. So the third thing is we need you all to be keeping track of, are there grants that just suddenly stop coming? Is there an after-school program that supports the black kids or the brown kids or the LGBTQIA kids in our community that suddenly just shuts down? Well, that's an alarm that we need you to raise, either to EdTrust, we have a website, edtrust.org, or also on your social media, and I'll make sure to share that, or also on your social media to your members of Congress, to your local your local and state representatives, because no one knows what's going on. He said, Donald Trump and his Secretary of Education said nothing has changed. Well, if you lay off hundreds of people from the Student Financial Aid Services part of the Department of Education, clearly something's going to change. So we need you all, as a third thing, we need you all to continue to uplift the stories, find out when these things happen. If someone in your neighborhood or your community can't get their FAFSA filled out because they've been on the line with the student aid services for 6 hours and haven't gotten a response, we need to know that that's going on, so then we can uplift it, and we need you to uplift it. So there's three things. One, keep track of what's going on as best you can in your local communities. Two, understand what's happening by, keeping track of what we may produce, what other folks up here may produce. And then three, make sure your members of Congress understand that this is unacceptable. And then four, try to fill up the gaps where you can as you see them coming in your communities.
Thank you very much. I actually heard Mandela speaking on WHUR, and that's how I was like, I gotta find this guy, I gotta reach out, because he knew his stuff, and in this room, that's what we do. So I'm really happy that you were able to make it. And what led me to say that is that's getting the message out. We have to get on different media platforms. We have to make ourselves vocal in every way possible. And one of the things that we're going to do in our policy workshops is teach people how to communicate, teach the constituents how to communicate with their members of Congress. Lisa, you had a question?
Yeah, I want to say it came out like during the George Floyd Black Lives Matter thing, where the loudest racists were able to twist our minds to say, we would say Black Lives Matter, and they would say, all white, all lives matter, right? So they're twisting people's thoughts. Back then, that's when it really started. Well, it didn't really start then, but now, DEI, the reason why DEI was started was so that businesses and the federal government and whoever didn't hire less qualified white men over qualified or overqualified women, people of color, or with people with disabilities. They've now twisted DEI to say it's about hiring black people or women who are less qualified over white people. They twisted it around, and look at all the people he put in as chairmen of all these committees are less qualified. White men. All of them.
Making America great again.
So the thing is, you guys are talking about the children, but they're twisting the minds of adults to unthink what DEI really stands for. And I think we need to educate the adults to make them instead of re-educating people to what DEI really stands for. It doesn't mean hiring people just for their color. And I think we need to start there to get people's minds back so that they can understand why it's important.
Absolutely. The adults need that.
Tia, can I respond to that? It's
Please.
so wonderfully said, because one of the things that I'm concerned about is if we failed anything in education, there are two things that I think we see now. That we have not done a great job of teaching people to think critically.
Right.
Therefore, we don't stand for much and we fall for anything. So all this disinformation, misinformation, turning our own rhetoric against us is what we see, is because so many people don't have the ability to think elegantly. That's the way I kind of express it. To know truth versus fantasy, what's real, what's not. So we evidently in education, and I say that because I've been a teacher and a school leader, we have not done a great job of helping people to learn how to think elegantly, think critically. The second thing is we have not, over the last 30 years, I'd say, taught people to be socially and emotionally strong. So we see the weaknesses in our own strengths of handling challenges, handling conflict, handling obstacles such as the one before us now. We have not prepared our people especially, because we've always had that, but we were able to survive it better in the past than now. And our children are weak in those things too, and that's social emotional learning. So if there's one thing that we need to advocate for, it's to allow schools to integrate the social emotional development that is a part of human development in our children so that they will become better adults. And also we need to do it for adult learning because we have the weaknesses there from early childhood throughout adulthood. So that's one of the things that we need to think about advocating for as we move forward. And during the pandemic, as Eric said, the federal government provided supplemental funds called ESSER funds, and I can't remember, elementary, secondary, emergency relief funds or something, whatever ESSER stands for. But those funds were given as supplemental funds to help with things like early learning, to help with food, to help with all the basic needs that people have. After school programs, tutoring, all of that support is needed if we're going to help children learn more effectively so they can become better adults and stronger children, because folks, our children generally are not well. So we have to begin to deal with their mental states, all the impact of social media and all of the things that cloud our thinking, so that as we look forward, these are the kind of things that we have to think about and re-educate people and debunk some of the lies and the misinformation that's out there, because unfortunately that's not going to stop. But if you're a good thinker, you can think past that. You can think underneath that, above that. And that's what we have to have as our goal of education, so that we are not just thinking about a test score or reading and math, but folks don't read now. So we have to not only teach them how to read, but to read critically and to think and to read and have different sources of information so that you know what truth is and you know what fallacy is. So that's a job that we all have to do in educating both adults and children.
Thank you very much. Max, you had a question?
I have a lot of thoughts, but I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. A few data points just to level set. I don't think we talk about this enough, but I'm a big David Attenborough fan. I watched all the nature films my whole life growing up. But he's one of the most unique individuals that ever walked the planet. And there's a Netflix documentary, you guys should check it out. But he was born almost 100 years ago or so, and the global population was about 2 billion people, right? 1920 something. My dad was born in 1953, and the population was still about 2.3 billion people. When I graduated high school in the late 90s, it was up to 6 billion. We're at 8 point something billion people today. So when we think about those big picture issues of like what is happening on a global level, we pair that with Dr. Neil
Sahoda.
Sahoda talked amazingly about a lot of the technological stuff that we're dealing with on large scale. And then when you pair that with the gentleman from New Jersey talking about access and possibility for our people, I just start putting together these puzzle pieces and saying, we got bigger things to address than the distractions of the DOE.
Right.
That's all theater. I want to know, like, what are we doing to level set and say, in this day and age, given these facts, what does it mean to educate children, regardless of zip code, regardless of border? Like, we have true issues that we need to solve as humans, and that's what I want education to be focused on. And I feel like we as adults often think about our past and don't think about the young people. We say, oh, they don't read, they don't do this, they don't. We're the boomers. They don't, we're the outdated ones. We don't understand how to use
That's
these
right.
technologies.
That's
they don't
right.
understand that for that technology to work, somebody's over here raping the bottom of the oceans for the minerals, and they're like fighting wars in Congo. That's the stuff that we need to be talking about.
Talk about it. Talk about it.
Galvanizing them to say your future is in jeopardy because we done messed it up.
Yep.
So let's have you be part of the conversation about what we should be doing to get out of the way, to create the policies that help you ensure a future where racism and all those other geopolitical or environmental possibilities and challenges don't matter because you connected and you got the right stuff to get through it. That's what I want this room and people listening to live stream. Let's get to that.
We need a toolkit. And I think that we can build that just even within this group and the people that we bring together and take it back to their states, to their organizations, and implement it, and have a strategy for doing so. We have a few minutes left. We have to wrap this panel up, but I was going to say, I saw it.
One thing
Absolutely.
really quickly? So I appreciate what you just said. One of the things at NBCDI that we're really focused on is using Afrofuturism as a tool for systems change. How are we really being rooted in Black knowledge, experience, and expertise? Because we do have the answers. We're just furthest from the resources and the funding. We know what our communities need. We have rich cultural capital. We have rich community assets, and oftentimes we are not in positions to be able to elevate those solutions that many people are already applying these solutions. There are communities across the country where these things that we're talking about are happening in very small pockets, but they don't have what they need to be able to make it expanded, to bring it to scale. And so this idea of Afrofuturism, not only just imagining the future that we envision, recognizing and undoing the roots of injustices and inequities that across all systems that are really foundational are the dehumanization, exclusion, oppression, exploitation of Black people. We need to use Afrofuturism as a lens for the future because we have to undo all those injustices. And so we need to work towards a liberatory, collective liberation, this idea of autonomy of all pieces. One thing I'm a research nerd, I love data, but research and data are just tools. And in the wrong hands, those tools will exact harm, and they already have, and they will continue to. We have to reclaim our research, our knowledge, the data that we're using. Black people are researched, but we are often outside of the positions of power to do the research, to understand what the questions are, to decide what data is relevant, to think about how it's contextualized and how it's analyzed and how it's used. We need to reclaim the power of that research and data so that we can be the ones that hold those pieces and are able to say, no, this is what's happening in our community. Instead of standards and metrics and measurements that are really white-centered and do not incorporate the ideas of who we are, who we've been, and who we want to become, we're stuck in this idea of whiteness and white-centered ideas of what a future should look like. We don't want what white people have. They're not doing the greatest either. We want what we want, and we know what that is. We just need the proximity to power to be able to do that. And we have to rely on our young people. They have vision too. They have ideas. They need to be involved in what this looks like just as much as everyone else.
Yes, they're a stakeholder.
Yeah, absolutely.
They are a part of in our school systems. They are a part of the stakeholders team, absolutely. Dang, it's so much good stuff. And I was like, we could just have a whole day of just education stuff, but was there another question? Did you have your hand? Yes, I thought so.
And it's back to the Department of Education. I'm a communications guy, and I listen to what we say and what others may say as well. I was listening to a report the other day, and when they asked someone from the administration, why are you closing the Department of Education? What is it that you hope to achieve? The response was, we're not trying to close the Department of Education and the programs, they say, will continue to exist. What we want to be able to do is to reallocate the resources so that the programs can be implemented in a better kind of way. Right? That's the
Let's
rhetoric.
get to the why, right.
I'm a believer that as much as we get upset about what happens, we also need to begin to listen to what they are saying as to what is their why. Because I believe that there is somewhere in there the opportunity to get in and build in the new process. I've sat here for 2 days and I've listened to people talk about this new environment and the impacts of social media, the impacts of new tools. Navigating Gray is talking about how do we gather data and repurpose that data so that we are able to interpret. My question to the panel is, what should we be doing as a strategy to impact how this new formulation is going to be distributed? It's going to happen, and I think you mentioned there's a big idea, but in the implementation is really where the opportunity is. And so how do we prepare ourselves and prepare our communities to take the opportunity to impact the implementation of what this is?
I would just take a little stab at this. This is a complicated question. Because we understand that the implementation and the strategy behind this is purposely created to exclude and harm us. So if they cared about how we thought, then they wouldn't be doing this in the first place. So I think we could start there. But I think that there is the larger question, which I feel like you were getting to a little bit of, where do we go? You know, we see this, like, what do we do now? And how do we move outside of this kind of paradigm that we are sitting in? So I think our first thing, if I was going to tell you the first thing that we need to do to affect the implementation, is just know what they're doing. And I feel like I'm saying this a lot of times, but it's like we really don't know. And so it's very hard for us to even really have a formed opinion of our next step because we don't know. Right? So this was the big splash, it was the communication, and now is the time that they're going to decide how they want to play it. So we had a letter come out that said, from the Office of Civil Rights, that was basically saying, you know, we're okay with discrimination across all schools, and this is actually the law of the land now. Right? Now we have a bunch of attorneys generals that are saying, well, we're going to tell you how you should interpret this. Don't go tear down every program that can be framed as DEI immediately, because they can't actually do this. And what are they even talking about, right? But when we think about how we can affect the implementation, so I think part of that is to be seen first. The first step that we can do to affect the implementation is look out for our students in our own communities. And as we see things change for them, make sure that we demand stopgaps wherever we can get them. That's the first. That's the first kind of like the least kind of policy deep thing. If you're in your community and you see your after-school program get canceled, or your program that goes into schools and mentors the kids get canceled because it's supporting, you know, black boys, then how do you fill those stopgaps as a community? I think that's the non-policy solution that everyone could do. As we get further into what we want to build out of this, you know, we're only about two months into this presidency. They haven't even, the dust hasn't even settled into what is going to happen. So that's just a very hard question to really even answer. But I want to just pass it to, you know, my mini table mate over here. Because you're working in a rural school and you're in an actual school district, so maybe you could give us a little bit more of what we should do as we see these federal policies be an opportunity for states and local districts to purposely,
So how do you take a challenge and turn it into an opportunity? And I love the fact that you said, check in on your local school officials. Check in with us. Ask us, how are you doing? What programs have been cut? What slice of the pie do you need a bigger slice? We need our CEP programs. Are you familiar with that? That's free lunch and free breakfast for 100% of the kids. That cannot stop. Those things cannot stop. Right? We need our before school and after school programs. They cannot stop. So you need to check in with us on a regular basis and ask how we are doing. And what services do you still need? And what, if you could imagine, what would it be that you would want? So I agree, check in with us. Yes, sir.
You're gonna have fewer resources that you're gonna have to reallocate. And you gotta think about this thing really differently than.
I've been doing
Well,
that.
let me
that for 35
let me take a little moderator leadership role, because like I said, we could go on and on about this. No, I don't even need the timer. We have people that have shown up. But we're not done, right? The whole purpose of the third year of this summit is to take the legs and now do workshops, webinars. We'll get everybody on a Zoom. We don't have to fly in, but we're going to continue to do the work, right? So we have your contact information, and you'll be getting a follow-up email. It's going to have a survey. It's going to thank you for coming, and then it's going to give you the blueprint for the workshops and which ones we would like you to come back and be a part of and lead the conversation on what it's going to be about. So this isn't something that's just going to bring, like I said yesterday, we have all this intelligence in the room. We're not reaching the people. So we, like in Mandela, we were talking about getting the information out, right? So that follow-up from this is how we're going to continue to do that. Is your question brief?
Yes.
Okay.
To this point, and I was going to say, I'm a former PTA president. So this is
You said boomer, you said, oh, former, okay.
PTA president
Okay.
of high schools, but to your point, there's a lot of organizations that help schools. So I lived in a predominantly white suburban area, and I made sure that as a PTA president, as a black person, that I helped my minority students, black students. So I made sure that we, did.
Right. Good
So
job. Thank you.
those organizations, people in those kind of,
Check in.
Roles.
can help.
Absolutely.
Fill in the gap.
Use your community, use your local leaders. We need to step up. We need to get in these positions. I made sure I got in a position because no one's going to help my people unless I put myself in that position. So I made sure I became the PTA president.
Right.
I made sure that people
Thank
saw
you.
who I was.
Right.
Thank you.
So I'm still doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Please be a part of
Thank
the
you.
Yeah, absolutely.
active
We are wrapping up, and oh man, the way the conversation went, right? It made me think about the Black Panther Party, okay? Because that's what made me. I said so, and one of the Kwanzaa principles is collective responsibility, okay? I think it's at Kuja Chakalia, and we are responsible for that. So literally, the government got the breakfast program from the Black Panther Party. They got up, the women and the men got their kids up, got them there, fed them breakfast, got them prepared for school. It was about, we don't have to rely on anybody to do anything. DEI doesn't impact, we run the room. You must be talking about somebody else because we bust the door down, right? And so, no, you've always needed us. Literally, like that's why you came and got us. You've always needed us. We never needed you. So I'm not afraid well, I mean, I'm not speaking, we are not afraid. We just have to organize. We have to galvanize, organize, mobilize, and stay connected, okay? So I would like to, is there any closing remarks that can be done under 1 minute and be respectful for the other people that have traveled all over to get on and share something? Just 1 minute from each of you, a closing remark.
It was just a pleasure to be here today and to think, pair, share, strategize on what we do next. It's time for us to dig our feet into the sand and see what comes next. We will be okay.
We will. Go ahead. You next.
Oh, I would say similar. It was a pleasure to be with y'all today and really talk about what we're seeing in front of us. These are difficult times, but Black folks have been here before, several times. So we're gonna have to do what we always do, which is weather the storm and then find a way to build a better umbrella so we don't get so wet next time.
Okay.
And then get off the island so we can go somewhere else.
I'm so ready. I'm signed up for that. Yes, Alicia.
Yeah, I just,
Ready for
again,
that.
as everyone else said, so glad to have been here. Thank you all. I just want to leave with a shameless plug, but first, I want to remind us that Black people have, resistance is rooted in our identity. We have always been people that have leaned into resistance, and reminding ourselves that is so important. We've also always been innovators. We've made ways out of no ways. We've created things that didn't exist. We've imagined, and we still have that power and the capability to do that. You're absolutely right. No one's going to save us but us. And so my shameless plug is that the National Black Child Development Institute is having our annual conference in Atlanta this year,
Awesome.
October 24th through the 26th, where you can gather with innovators, thinkers, educators,
Awesome.
Black people who are really for the thriving, the health, and the well-being of Black children. And also join your local village. We have 26. Please reach out to your local village and join and be a part of NBCDI, because it's just as you were saying, we're in communities, we're doing this work, and we would really love for you all to join us in it.
Thank you very much for that. We will put that information on our webpage, and we'll participate. All right.
Thank you so much for this time, because we're looking at education from the perspective of all of us, and we're looking at it as a whole in terms of how everything affects education. But I just want us to remember that there's a saying, and I love African American saying, or African sayings, them that's got the goal makes the rules. And every time we get closer to accomplishing the goal, they change the rules. So that's been our history. We have to remember that we've been here, as Mandela said, during the 1970s, 80s, and early 90s. We began to narrow the gaps.
We did.
We have to ask what happened then, because there's some things that remain constant, no matter what generation. And yes, how we feel and know ourselves matter. So as we go about working together, I think it's exciting that we can be a part of planning the future.
Yes.
So as we work together, it's just exciting to know that we're not just looking at the world change in front of us, but we're willing to get in there and help to make it better.
I like that ended with positivity. Like, we don't have to feel so discouraged and like, oh my gosh, but that's a positive ending. Thank you very much for that. Thank you, panelists, for coming. Thank you for bringing in people with you. I encourage you to stay, and enjoy the other panels. We have lunch coming, more networking, of course, and the audience members, please, if you want, you can engage, ask questions, but let's give them an applause. Thank you so much. As we transition, we're going to put up, we're transitioning into a speaker. I'm going to get into that, but I'll let us transition, and if you want to get some water or do something, we are going to get started in about 4 minutes, okay? And I'll come back. All right, thank you all. Thank you.